going to be doing is holding up a bunch of these little signs here, these kind of Wile E. Coyote signs. And I'm going to hold up a sign with a word on it. I'm going to give you the definition. I might talk and explain it for a little bit, and then I'll repeat the word and definition, set the sign down, move on to the next sign. So keep track of the signs, and you'll be able to keep track of where you are in the process. We're going to have 20 of these. The first chunk all have to do with the way time is organized in music. Now, before we begin on defining these terms, I want to give a brief word of explanation about a phrase that you're going to hear me use a lot that may or may not be familiar to you. It is the phrase piece of music. Okay. Especially if you're not a classical musician, you might be used to thinking of music in terms of songs, and that makes perfect sense. The word piece, the way I use it, is probably going to be roughly equivalent to the way you think of a song. There is technically a difference. You're not going to be tested on it, but here it is, an explanation. A song is in fact a type of piece. Okay, you have piece is the bigger circle there, and then within that are a few small circles, one of which is song. You'll see there's a symphony there, an opera. I could have put 100 other different types of pieces of music. The deal is that for all of the definitions that I'm going to be giving you here, they all apply for any type of piece of music, whether it is a song or whether it's one of these other pieces. Okay? All right, so here we go. Now the first set of words, as I said, is going to be dealing with how time works in music, because music is an art that exists in time. It's not like a painting where the painting is smack in front of you, the entire painting, and you can stand and process it as you see fit. Music starts up, it goes, it's usually got a beginning and a middle and a sort of end. And the way music works in time is one of its most important attributes. So that's why the first word that we're going to get here is rhythm. Rhythm is the organization of time in music. Essentially when musical events happen. Rhythm is super duper important. Different cultures approach it in different ways and deal with it in different ways, but it is perhaps the single most important element of music. Okay, rhythm, the organization of time in music. Moving on to sign number 2, we have beat. A beat is an even pulse that divides time into equal segments. And if you put your hand here on your chest, what you will feel, hopefully, is a thump, 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 thump. The sound of your heart doing, guess what? Beating. Your heart is beating more or less steadily. It can speed up or slow down just like the beat in a piece of music can. But it is continuing regardless of whether or not you're paying attention to it and regardless of whether you're even awake. And a beat in a piece of music works the same way. There might be a sound happening on the beat, or there might not be, but the beat is still continuing. For instance, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, and so on. I was saying the words 1, 2, 3 on one of those beats, but I was silent on the other beat. And I could do that again and be totally silent, and the beat would still be working and continuing in exactly the same way. So you heard there were sounds going on some of those beats, but you could still feel that the division of time was the same regardless of whether I was clapping or not clapping. The beat was continuing steadily regardless of there was sound, whether or not there was sound. And that's the way beat works. So, okay, beat, the even pulse that divides time into equal segments. Number 3, the measure. A measure is a regularly recurring group of beats. For the sake of the quiz, you can think of just the measure as being a group of beats. Measure has an exact synonym, which is bar. That's because in Western music notation, which is the kind that has always been used in America and has been used in Europe ever since, the late medieval era, you show the existence of a measure. You show the group of beats by sticking a vertical line through the music. So it looks like a bar, called a bar line, and I like bars. So occasionally I make a mistake, basically, and use the word bar when I could just as easily be using measure. This is pedagogically sort of bad because you're only supposed to be using one term. You're not supposed to be, using synonyms and expecting students to be keeping track of what those synonyms are. But occasionally I'm going to slip up and say bar instead of measure because they mean exactly the same thing. Anyway, Like I said, regularly recurring group of beats. And that regularly recurring is the important part. Now, you remember I was going 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. I was arranging those beats into groups of 4. Three of them had a sound. The first 3, 1, 2, 3, silence. 1, 2, 3, silence. 1, 2, and so on. I was creating groups, regularly recurring groups, of 4 beats. And each of those groups of 4 beats was, in this case, a measure. It's most common for measures to have 4 beats. They don't have to. In some pieces of music, the measures will have 3 beats. A waltz, where it goes 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, or a march, where it goes 1, 2, 1, 2. Lots of other possibilities too. The most common thing is measures with groups of 4 beats in them, and that's what we're going to be discussing most of the time, especially when we're talking about any form of American popular music. So measure, a regularly recurring group of beats, aka a bar. Now, a few words having to do with those beats within the measure. The next one is downbeat. This is our 4th word, and a downbeat is the first beat of a measure. Now, it doesn't matter if the measure has 3 beats, or 2 beats, or 4 beats, or 6 beats, or whatever. The first one is called the downbeat. And typically in any form of Western music, whether it's American pop music of some sort, or Western classical, or jazz of some sort, or whatever, the downbeat is where a lot of really important musical events happen. So a downbeat is going to be an important term that we're going to be coming back to. It's always, once again, downbeat, the first beat of a measure. Now, the downbeat has another almost equally important counterpart, and that is upbeat. The upbeat is the last beat of a measure. And the upbeat, very often, the songwriter or the composer will set things up so that the upbeat seems to propel us forward into the downbeat, to give the piece of a sense of kind of energy as it's swinging through those recurring cycle of measures. So an upbeat is also an important beat. We'll be using that word from time to time. Upbeat, the last beat of a measure. Another related word is this, backbeat. Backbeat is an emphasis on beats 2 and 4 of a 4-beat measure. The backbeat is something that is unique to American popular music. It's something that was developed from African traditions. European classical music, and in fact European folk music, didn't really use a backbeat. It was something that didn't cross their minds, apparently. But in America, when you fused elements of European music with elements of African music, what we ended up with was this really effective thing called a backbeat. In this backbeat, this emphasis on beats 2 and 4 in a 4-beat measure is really great for dancing. Because what a backbeat does is it tells you when to move your hips. If the music is going 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, as a dancer, you pretty much instinctively feel that you should move your feet on 1 and swing your hips on 2. Move your feet on 3, swing your hips on 4. So backbeat is great for dancing. When we encounter early jazz, we're going to encounter a little bit of a backbeat. And that gets heightened and pronounced as you move on through American musical history, as you go into rhythm and blues, especially of the 1940s, and a backbeat is the most important element of rock and roll. And all of the types of music that derived either from R&B or rock and roll, like soul and funk and hip hop and blah, 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 blah. So backbeat, something we encounter in American popular music, and it is the emphasis on beats 2 and 4 of a 4-beat measure. Moving on now to tempo. Tempo is the musical term for the speed of the beats. You could sing a song slow, twinkle, twinkle, little star, or sing it fast, twinkle, twinkle, little star, and what you'd be doing is you'd be changing the tempo. The second version had a faster tempo. The first version had a slower tempo. So, okay, musical term for the speed of the beats, and that is tempo, the speed of the beats. Now, coming up to a long one, and I had to write small, so I should probably hold it up close to the camera. Ooh, there we go. All right, got that? There. Syncopation. Syncopation, long word. Emphasis placed on a note that happens between beats. And this is a one that is best shown rather than it is explained. Now, sometime in elementary school, you all learned a song that goes something like this. Camptown races, sing this song, doo-dah, doo-dah. Camptown racetrack 5 miles long, all the doo-dah day. Now, the only part of that song that anybody liked and remembered was the doo-dah, doo-dah part. The other stuff, you know, when you were in the 3rd grade, you went, Camptown something, something long, doo-dah, doo-dah. Camptown something, something, all the doo-dah day. You remember the doo-dah part because the doo-dah was the fun part in that. And that is the syncopation at work there. So I'm clapping here. Dun, 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 doo-dah, doo-dah. With that da, there's this important musical event that is happening in between the beats. We've established the flow of the beats with the previous several notes of the song. Camptown something, 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 doo-dah, doo-dah. And then we have that fun little syncopation, which kind of makes you want to doo-dah, doo-dah, move around a little bit. And that's what everybody loved about that song. It was really effective syncopation used by the songwriter, Stephen Foster, I think it was. So there you go, syncopation, emphasis placed on a note or sound that happens between beats. Okay, one last word having to do with the way time works in music. We've been talking about a lot of terms that have to do with small units of time. The beat is usually a very small unit of time. Maybe you get 1 beat per second, maybe 1 beat per half second. So, 2 beats per second. But now this is a term that we're going to zoom out a lot, and this is one that you could say is a big picture sort of term because it pertains to how, I'll give you the definition. It's the general shape, that is the design of a musical piece. Form, the general shape, the design of a musical piece. This is a little bit of a harder concept to talk about. Talking about these little narrow bits of time. Now we're going to be talking about the biggest units of time that a songwriter or a composer can work with. And how that songwriter or composer decides when certain musical events are going to happen. And they make that decision based on the effect they want it to have on the listener, usually. So, for instance, once again, this is one that's better shown than explained. If I were to sing, Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are, up above the world so high, like a diamond in the sky. And then stop. What would you want me to do? I trust you would want me to finish the song. It feels weird. It feels very incomplete to leave the song with, up above the world so high, like a diamond in the sky. It doesn't feel like you've arrived back at home yet. And that's because the anonymous songwriter centuries ago figured out a way to use form really effectively in this case, which is you have a little section of music, twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. Then you sing a contrasting section of music, up above the world so high, like a diamond in the sky. And then you return to the same thing that you started out with. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. And it has this satisfying feeling of starting at home, going away from home, and then returning to home again. So that's the way form works in music. And it's very important as we work our way through European musical history, especially. Composers, people who write music, are increasingly concerned with form and are working with more and more, ever more complicated forms in their music because they want to do ever more tricky and sophisticated things to their listeners. A lot of the popular songs that we'll be working with